I'm out of tequila here at the residence. That is the current state of me post round one. But I thought you
You're
would
on
be
fire
gloating.
right now. Look at you. You're on one.
I thought you would be gloating at this time. You can't gloat
I
because
can't.
you took a running back.
The only reason I can gloat is that I took over half a running back in the first round, which is what the Chiefs got because he's not even going to play full time, and then under 1.5. So it was like I somewhat benefited from it, but obviously as a Chiefs fan and as a fan of the franchise and wanting the things to go well, like it tilts me. And the other thing, your Niners, I had a prop
Stop.
on Kinlaw under 13.5, thinking they go to you guys. And they screw me by going back one pick and then taking him. What do you say to that, George?
So I think the best way, we can't just talk about our teams the whole time, in large part because I won't make it. That's the thing. I will not make it. We should talk about both of them because they were noteworthy, though, at some point. Let's do this to start. The narrative going into the draft was super great offensive tackle, great wide receiver classes. Joe Burrow's phenomenal. We're not sure about Tua versus Herbert, who's going to get taken higher. What was the most surprising thing, given those narratives going in, and now looking back, 5 minutes after it's over?
I think the most surprising thing was that the two teams that wanted quarterbacks got to stay at their own picks. I think it was Chris that talked about this on the broadcast, but you really have to wonder what the Chargers were thinking, because if they liked Herbert over Tua, they kind of took a big gamble, didn't they?
Yes.
And I don't like the process, but man, they could have gotten stuck with a quarterback that clearly didn't like, or were they so ambivalent to who was taken, did they not care enough? Were they 50-50? Because that's bad too. The whole thing made zero sense to me.
I was trying to figure that out too. And here's the thing that I came away with from this draft. I didn't think there were a lot of people that felt really good one way or another, aside from the Niners, who were like, well, clearly these are the guys that we've got to get. We're going to go up and get Ayuk. But I think maybe it was, hey, we're not so sure who the better player is. Mm-hmm. And if we're not sure, it's a good sign, honestly, that they would say, okay, well, let's stand pat and let players fall to us. I thought there were great examples of that. And unfortunately, it wasn't that way for the Niners, who it should have been, because Judy and Lamb both fell to them. But to me, and I'll just get into it here, I thought the best picks were basically all receivers. I thought Tua at 5 was a tremendous pick. That's going to be a pick where 10 years down the road, we look back and we go, I can't fucking believe these three teams took these players. And maybe they're great players, but Tua at the quarterback position can just be so much more valuable. And then the other ones were Judy to the Broncos at 15, Lamb to the Cowboys at 17, and then Rager to the Eagles at 21. I would not be surprised if when the playoffs roll around, God willing they do next year, we look back and we go, wow, those were some pretty shrewd picks by the Cowboys and the Eagles, because it has really elevated their team.
Well, I tweeted this out, and obviously, I don't know how much this has to do with McCarthy's rebirth or whatever, but his best years as an offensive play caller was when he had force multipliers at wide receiver, right? Mm-hmm. And, Cobb in the slot replaced Donald Driver. Jennings was replaced by Jordy, right? And it was James Jones. And, year after year after year, Devontae Adams, right, was sort of the last guy. He was their third receiver the last time Rodgers won the MVP, right? And now when you look at, obviously Prescott isn't as talented as Rodgers, but when you look at that team, you're thinking to yourself, okay, this makes a ton of sense, right? And now, not only that, they have Zeke, who, if they just give him a normal, a Damian Williams number of touches, that's going to be a really good offense.
A very good offense, right?
I mean, best in the NFC East for sure. And And even though, obviously the Eagles did a really good thing with getting Rager, a guy that we talked about on the, we drafted him pretty high, but he ended up going in the first round, as far as, on the mock draft earlier today. But he, again, that's going to be a good division. And so then you look back to pick 2 and you think to yourself, okay, Washington, they get better by taking a defensive end. And you can make a huge argument that both Dallas and Philadelphia got better than they did, right? And 20 picks later, which really tells you sort of like how maybe Washington really screwed up that pick at number 2.
Can I tell you so now maybe we should talk about the worst picks. And let me tell you the litmus test for, oops, I fucked up. You make a pick, and the first thing everyone says is, oh, you know who's just really excited? The team picking now. And that's exactly what happened. The Niners picked Javon Kinlaw, and all of a sudden everyone goes, you know who's ecstatic right now? The Denver Broncos. And you know who's ecstatic right now? The Dallas Cowboys, and so on and so forth. And to me, that is what we talk about all the time. It's like you make the move. Sometimes it's best to put yourself in the shoes of your opponent and go, what do they least want me to do? And I can –
yeah, perfectly said, right? The moment that you go for a 4th down, or you don't go for a 4th down, the other team exhales. The moment you take a player in front of them, and in the draft analyst is saying, wow, Philadelphia is really looking pretty here, right? Yep. It's exactly how you said. But I think, if you, what would you, because I actually don't think the 49ers and the Chiefs made the worst draft picks tonight.
Okay.
I think there's a clear leader in the clubhouse right now.
Okay. Let me see if I can guess the one that – so there are a couple that come to mind. And I'm going to go in reverse order, like sort of my bottom 5 here. So certainly in the bottom 5 is Jordan Brooks to the Seahawks, which is just hilarious. The Chargers trading up for Kenneth Murray, hilarious. The Dolphins needing to get someone that can be decent at tackle and taking Austin Jackson instead of Josh Jones. Hilarious. I'm not even going to put Kinlaw on this because there is Justin Herbert at 6 for the Chargers that I think was a disaster.
Yep.
And then the worst one, and I think I've got this right, is Derrick Brown at 7 of the Panthers.
You missed it. No, the worst pick in the draft is the Green Bay Packers trading up for Jordan Love.
Oh, I've got a theory, though. No,
that is absolutely the worst. I know your theory, but Jordan Love is not a first-round caliber NFL quarterback. And the other thing is, you think Favre was vindictive and he made Rodgers sit on the bench for Rodgers hates his own family. Like, you think he's letting this guy get a rep in practice? There's no way.
Okay, Jordan Love on the face of it is not worth a first-round pick and is not worth trading up for.
Yeah.
But Rodgers is just that crazy, and you've got to get the most out of him. And if this is the only way to get the most out of him is to actually do the thing that he was for someone else, right? Yeah. He was a late first-round pick. He comes in, he sits under Brett Favre, and then he takes over. And you literally make that guy and Chris said this, and I thought it was great. Chris was the smartest guy I've ever talked to, in football. He comes in, he just knows so much. Guys that smart, you just can't motivate in the normal way. And to me, I know this is crazy. I legitimately think this was we are going to motivate Aaron Rodgers in the only way we know how. And if so, then it's worth it because Aaron Rodgers can actually take his game from 15th to 3rd. We've seen that. Jordan Love, no hope.
The issue is that, you think about, and I know he was picked a little later than Rodgers was, but the Packers traded up for him. And they didn't even trade up for Rodgers. They sat there and waited for him and I watched the documentary. They sat there and waited for him to back up all the way until 24 to go. And it's like, I don't know. My thing is Herbert. I think Herbert and Love are in the same cluster. So absolutely using the 6th pick on Herbert is terrible, but just the act of trading up when you're not even going to realize the increased variance, right? Unless somehow that motivation makes Rodgers brilliant. But the same thing we talk about with McCarthy. I think adding a wide receiver who is a good player is going to do way more for Rodgers than motivating him.
To be determined, though. So okay, let's go back and take a look at this pick. So they are at 30. They trade up to 26, right, with the Dolphins. So they could have stayed back and waited. And man, I mean, Denzel Mims, Laviska Shenault, Michael Pittman Jr. still on the board. Josh Jones. So that Josh Jones is still there. Grant Delpit still there.
Xavier McKinney still there.
Man, I mean,
Christian Fulton still there. I mean, there are honestly, the hometown Bengals are going to get a really good player tomorrow.
Let's talk about that real quick. Okay, you're at 33. If you told me going into this, you can get Joe Burrow, and then you can have your pick of, and I'll just throw a few out here: Christian Fulton, Josh Jones, Laviska Shenault, and Michael Pittman Jr. You're doing cartwheels. Now, They'll probably go out and pick, I don't know, Yetur Gross-Matos or something like that.
Well, they had Jalen Johnson as well as on the board.
DeAndre Swift. I gotcha.
Dang it. Yeah, that sucks. But yeah, I mean, they're in a good, like, the Bengals are not that far away. Here's an interesting thing. A couple things. No veteran player was traded tonight. No Chris Jones, Yannick Ngakoue, other players that sort of are on the. Do you think that the intermediate time, so now until when the draft is tomorrow, do you think that that's when that happens? Because a few of the teams have sort of shook out what they're going for, and some of those players are probably worth a second-round pick after you factor in the contract. Do you think that happens?
I do, and here's why. There are players now, and this was the story really of the draft. There are not that many there's a lot of jumbling amongst how teams feel about these players within position, and how honestly how we feel about them as well. And so teams are going to go, okay, now things are thinned out a little bit, but I don't want to be stuck with the third round option. So I want to jump into the second round and grab that guy. And I think of T. Higgins, who we talked about this prop, and we should talk about some of these props. Henry Ruggs, first overall wide receiver at plus 600. Absolutely fantastic.
I mean, it saved my night, frankly.
Derrick Brown was another one. Isaiah Simmons over 6.5. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, first running back taken, plus 500.
Yeah, I mean, and then let's go back. So when we did our DraftKings, I mean, obviously both of us got the first two picks right. The offensive lineman that went off the board first was interesting, right? I mean, that one, I think most people who, were betting chalk either had Wirfs or Wills, and ended up being Thomas, who we had written about as the best offensive lineman prior to the combine. Good on the New York Giants for sort of leaning on that information. But that one was kind of an interesting one. If you bet Thomas, congratulations, because that was a big plus price pop there for you. Obviously, we talked about on the podcast today, we talked about Jordan Love over, which was one that did not work out, was Alabama over players. Actually, they missed it by 2 players. So both Diggs and Xavier McKinney last until round 2.
Okay. So there's some unheralded picks. And here's the thing that I think is really interesting about the first round. The player comes off the board and we immediately jump to, okay, if he hits like 90th percentile, was this a good pick? And I thought a good example of that, a really good example of that was when Derrick Brown comes off and, Chris goes, well, what if he's Fletcher Cox? So, okay, well, what if every player is awesome? And that's the thing that is important to remember, is not a lot of these players are going to be that awesome. The picks that are not super juicy one way or the other, that maybe are flying under the radar in your mind, that later down the road you're like, wow, that was a really savvy pick.
Oh yeah, I mean that's obviously I think the Simmons to Arizona makes a lot of sense. They were not a team that I thought of in that spot, even when doing the mocks and everything. But I tweeted out the where they were attacked last year, and it is a spot where he is a very when you have Buda Baker, you have him, you have some I think pretty flexible pieces on that defense. That's a good thing. So I like that pick a lot. When I look at some of these, I mean, AJ Terrell to the Falcons, I like. He didn't, he had some bad games, but I think as far as being able to play a position the Falcons really need, that's a good pick. Honestly, I like the Ayuk pick from San Francisco. I don't necessarily like the trade up, but I think that's an underrated selection of a player. I think Jefferson to Minnesota is a very good one as well. So, like you said, a lot of wide receivers that we're going to like, a lot of defensive backs, but those are ones that, I think stand out to me.
Yeah, the Giants did not make a flashy pick, and I sort of thought they would. I kept kind of thinking they would go Becton. And Andrew Thomas is not New York is not going to be super excited about it. And yeah, they should have tried to trade back. I just don't think anyone really wanted to trade up. That seems to me to be pretty apparent. Yeah. And so to be able to stay composed and take a guy that, look, he might not be Tyron Smith or David Bakhtiari, but that's not what you need. You just need someone that's not a disaster at the offensive tackle position. Like, that is worth paying for. And sure, I would have preferred they take a wide receiver and whatever, but they didn't mess it up, and that's important. I got to say this too. So Henry Ruggs, we talked a lot about. Look, our projection system loves him. Athleticism, awesome. He produced at a high level, even though it wasn't a large amount of quantity. I am nervous. About him in Oakland. Should I be this nervous? Is it just me being pessimistic? I'm very nervous.
I don't think so. I mean, you got to be more nervous about the fact that Derek Carr does not seem particularly thrilled about throwing the ball downfield, right? And that he might end up being more of a more of a runoff guy, more of a Sammy Watkins type player than an actual difference maker. That's really what you got to be worried about. But no, I don't, I don't foresee him having issues there. It'll be interesting to see. I honestly thought that they were going to take a stab at Jordan Love at 19, but we talked about this, earlier today. Gruden doesn't like to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. So
here's the thing that I'm encouraged by, and this is what I loved about Ruggs. And Mike mentioned this, he didn't have a ton, he's great speed, but he's not a guy that was continually winning deep routes. What he did do was, when he touched the ball, he was always a threat to take it the distance. And so maybe I shouldn't be as nervous, because really the way that Gruden will employ him is to take advantage of what he can do after he catches the 5-yard throw from Derek Carr, which is really the max on what he can actually put forth. And that gives you the ability then to take ball downfield. I don't know if you can tell, I'm a little hot right now.
Yeah, I mean, at least the 49ers got a player in Ayuk who I think will be pretty damn good.
Okay.
And frankly, Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be great. But they're just overpaid for him. Here's a question that I have. The offensive linemen, they were 7 that were taken, right? Yeah. 6 tackles, an interior player. It ended up going over the total, right? And over 5.5 was minus 600 last time I saw it. Even over 6.5 was minus 150-ish. And that took the over for offensive players prop sailed over 15.5. Do you think that offensive performance will go up significantly as a result of this? Because I do think, we've charted this offensive line play has gone down since the 2011 CBA. will not have practices until at best July this year. But do you think that like long term, this is a good thing for offensive football if, hopefully, half of these players work out and you have some bookends for, the next decade?
That's a really sound way to think about this and encouraging. The combination of better tackle play, better offensive line play, and better receiver play would do a world of good. It may even help a guy like Justin Herbert play for a couple seasons before the inaccuracy. We should not be as harsh towards Herbert. I hope he succeeds. I just think it was a mass overpayment there.
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, he'll be a player who will be under a lot of scrutiny, but it's an odd pick because he's going to a Chargers team where I don't think he's going to beat out Tyrod Taylor in a situation where they want to win football game. And Anthony Lynn doesn't have. I know he had a contract extension, but it's a fickle business. If they go 5-11 again, it's not going to be pretty. I think.
Well,
for
here's
his
the other
job
thing,
status
is he doesn't seem like a guy who accepts. They built their roster to win now, as you said, and Anthony Lynn doesn't seem like the guy who's like, you know what, let's slog through with Justin Herbert, who we mentioned this stat, the highest rate of uncatchable throws to open receivers between 5 and 20 yards downfield last season. So that will not be tolerated. And the tricky thing is that they have other options. You mentioned Tyrod Taylor. There's Cam Newton. There's Jameis Winston. And Justin Herbert is going to have to compete with Joe Burrow and maybe not Tua. Maybe Tua sits. So if Burrow's over there lighting it up and Herbert is not, that's not going to go well. But I like your point of saying, hey, the offense offense is obviously getting better, and this draft is a good sign that it will continue going that way. Let me talk. I need to vent a little bit about what the Niners did. So I actually really like Javon Kinlaw. I like to trade back from 13 to 14. Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Reagor, all on the board. So let's say you just go, you know what? We love Javon Kinlaw, but the value just isn't there. I'm going to take one of those receivers, any of them. Take your pick. Yeah, he's probably not there at 31. Sure. I mean, they end up trading up anyway, so maybe he's not there at 25. But how big of a difference is it between him and DT number 2? 3, I guess. Derrick Brown is number 1. That's the part that I just can't square and frustrates me.
Well, and there was it's late. Who the third? I mean, there was only 2 taken in the first round. Yeah.
Right. It's Blacklock.
Yeah, Blacklock. But there was also, I mean, it's not
Davidson.
that big.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that big. And it shows, right? Like it shows where you're in a position there where, yeah, let's say you like Kinlaw the best, but you might get an opportunity to pick the third best guy, let's say in round 2. Mm-hmm. Not anymore, I don't think no, it'll be fine. But at the time, but at wide receiver, you're all the way down to wide receiver 6 at the point in time where you take the guy, right? Whereas you could have had wide receiver 2 on the board. It was just, I think, a classic misunderstanding of, sort of like the flatness of the curve and the obviously positional value, which is your biggest gripe and a fair one. I just think that was, where they erred. And granted, they did some redeemable things. They traded back, although it was among all the trades that didn't involve a quarterback, it was the weakest trade where the winner won. They were at 54%. The other ones were about 60%. They got some value, but I don't think they could have really maximized that trade effort by getting Lamb or Jeudy.
And that would have been sensational. Speaking of a trade that I thought was really savvy, the Patriots just keep doing smart things, right? They move back out of the first round, and there are a ton of players that are going to slip, and they're going to end up with plenty of good players to choose from. They're going to end up with an extra pick, obviously. I thought that was a super savvy move. I really liked what the Vikings did. Justin Jefferson at 22. They trade back with the 49ers and then get Jeff Gladney at 31. like if here's the funny thing. So that the Vikings picked at 22 and 31 and got two players that, look, if the Niners had taken them at 13 and 31, I'd be like, you know what? Pretty happy about that. Like, I'll take Justin Jefferson and Jeff Gladney any day. So I thought that was a really good move by them. I loved what the Ravens did, just standing pat. And then another one that was mystifying to me was what the Saints did. Do you have any idea what that was all about?
Well, that's going to be another one. Whereas, like, when's the next interior lineman going?
Maybe
40,
maybe
45?
33, given what we've seen.
Like, they could move up in the second round and could have gotten the best. You know, like that's the issue. You know, they're not a team with a ton of needs, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, that particular pick. And I agree with you. The Minnesota Vikings, you know, let's put it this way. The bar was high. I mean, they needed to have an amazing day. And, you know, and part of what we talked about earlier, you know, is sometimes doing well involves people in front of you doing dumb things. Yep. And so Minnesota, you know, they took Jefferson. That was great. You know, it was because there was a run on wide receivers 5 picks too late, right? And so they end up bumping into Justin Jefferson at 22. That's going to be a pretty good player. I mean, the types of throws Kirk Cousins excels in are those, like, you know, flag routes out of the slot, right? Or they're the, you know, the crossers off of play action that he ran so well. You're like, that's going to be a good player for Minnesota. Gladney as well, and he's got that inside outside. But really, the best part about the Gladney trade is that they fleeced the Niners, right, to move back. And then the best thing that happened to Minnesota all night was the Jordan Love draft pick by the Green Bay Packers.
That's the best thing?
I think so. Yeah. I think
I'm really excited to see how this plays out.
My thing is the reason Aaron Rodgers has struggled in the last 5 years relative to where he was, which is a first ballot Hall of Famer, still probably is, but MVP. The reason that Aaron Rodgers has struggled over the past half a decade is not because he's got something wrong mentally. It's not because he couldn't get along with his coach and his coach was getting massages when he shouldn't have been. It's not none of this stuff. It's the fact that he didn't have the weapons to throw to. Like, Jordy tore his ACL in 2015 and he struggled. And, you know, Randall Cobb loses his fastball and then leaves. James Jones left, came back slow. You know, Devontae Adams is his only NFL caliber wide receiver on the team. And sure, you can motivate him with Jordan Love, and it's going to be hilarious when Jordan Love takes over and they have no one to throw to. But right now, like, I don't buy the motivational thing.
Yeah, that's me trying to figure out how that makes any sense. The Packers' next pick is at 62. So, you know, good luck finding one of the few receivers that are left. And there are some good ones. Pittman, Chenault, Higgins is still there. You know, so there's some playmakers still left to be had. They probably won't get them. Denzel Mims was another one. Should we do this? Should we just play a little 3 up, 3 down, 3 favorite teams that did the most for themselves and teams that hurt themselves the most?
I like that. And then let's make 3 predictions for tomorrow.
Let's do it. All right. You want to do worst ones or best
I'll do
ones?
Yeah, let's be negative. I'll do the 3 worst.
Okay.
I think the 3 worst moves in the draft today or yesterday, whenever. I think taking Justin Herbert at 6, Chargers. You know, I would say Washington, but I don't know what the trade down structure is with the pandemic and everything. So I'm gonna give them a little bit of a pass. I
mean, you've trashed Jordan Love here, so
I think obviously Green Bay and Jordan Love is another one, and then Jordan Brooks for Seattle. My thing is yes, the Chiefs drafted a running back at 32, but the Seahawks drafted an off the ball linebacker to continue to play 4-3 base 70% of the time that I've never heard of before. And so that's a really bad pick.
The Niners, in all honesty, the Niners' best pick was the Seahawks taking
Jordan Brooks. Well, I like the way you think. I like looking at the Vikings. The Vikings crushed because Green Bay picked Jordan Love. The Bears did better by picking no one.
Right.
And Okuda's fine, but the Lions stink. So,
So really, I should be kind of excited because the Seahawks, the Niners made a great pick at 27 with the Seahawks selecting a run-stuffing linebacker.
And the Rams are hopeless because they won't have a first-round pick for like the next 10 years. And the Cardinals are telling you guys objects in the mirror are closer than they appear, I think.
True. Did you see Cliff Kingsbury's setup?
Dude,
Come on, man.
I mean, the guy, is it a little tone deaf though?
He's just got a nice crib. Okay.
Yeah.
My three worst. The Panthers at 7 taking Derrick Brown. And the reasoning that they had for it, which the Panthers liked cornerback Isaiah Simmons a lot at 7, and he was the best pure athlete on the board, but they felt he was a better fit for a veteran team because of his ability to play so many positions. So they went with defensive tackle Derrick Brown.
It's a Christian Wilkins pick all over again.
What? Let's see. Number 2 is the Chargers as a whole. So Justin Herbert combined with trading up to get Kenneth Murray. Like what? That made absolutely no sense.
When you could have had Isaiah Simmons like right there.
You could have had Isaiah Simmons, but you also could have just stood. Patrick Queen is a better linebacker than Kenneth Murray. So that was very confusing to me. I only have one left. And so I have to give it to the Chiefs. And here's why. This will not hurt them next year. It may never hurt them, but it decreases their chances of being bulletproof. And they should be bulletproof. If you have Patrick Mahomes, you have a vast margin for error. Just don't tempt the devil. Why would you do this? Why would you use a first-round pick on a running back when all you've got to do is just keep picking the valuable players at positions that keep Patrick Mahomes alive and allow him to do the things that he does? That, to me, it's not as glaring because it's the Chiefs, but, man, it could potentially be, a part of the puzzle when it ultimately unravels, if it ever does.
And I think the biggest issue is, so they can curb a lot of this if they trade Chris Jones tomorrow. If you keep Chris Jones and keep trying to run it back, no cap space, they only have 4 draft picks left. No draft picks, no cap space. I agree with you. That's the issue, is 2 years down the line when you're only 2 receivers on contract, or McCole Hardman, who's unproven, and Tyreek Hill, who is an off the field issue, right? That's the tough part, and why a wide receiver at that spot would have been fine. A defensive back at that spot would have been fine. But yeah, I mean, ultimately a lot hinges on whether they can trade Chris Jones tomorrow.
That's interesting. That's a really glass half full way to look at it. All right, you're 3 up. 3 best teams that help themselves the most.
Well, I really think that getting Tua at 5 without having to trade, it was a terrific move. And I think I might just lump this all in with the hard part is lumping the Dolphins in general. Is I really like their trade back as well when we all thought they were taking DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
but in fact, Austin Jackson was an overdraft 100%. When Josh Jones on the board, and even, I mean, frankly, I thought Isaiah Wilson's a better prospect than Jackson. So, but I will keep it to just that pick for them. The Vikings as a whole did terrific. I think they deserve number 2 for me, and then obviously CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. I think really demonstrating, at least in this instance, that they get and then they really understand to enhance the strength for them.
So the Dolphins are the first one that comes to mind, but I can't give it to them because they then just butchered an opportunity to have the best draft. And I did a ton of mock drafts with them and had a bunch that I loved. And there were so many players that they could have taken. The idea of going Tua, Josh Jones, and then what did they have? They had 26 and they traded down to 30. I mean, and they could have, they had so many options there. There were plenty of receivers on the board. They could have stayed at 26, and taken one of those receivers there, or traded down and gotten them. So they butchered that. So for that, they miss out. The number 1 for me is Dallas. Dallas is a team that got a player that a really bad team should be getting, right? They got a player
100%.
that this is why CeeDee Lamb, if 5 years from now we go, hey, CeeDee Lamb was the best receiver in this class, maybe that he was, but it's most likely that he ended up in the best situation. This situation is phenomenal. And this, to me, I said this, I'm going to look like a genius because I was like, hey, the Dallas Cowboys are going to compete for a Super Bowl this year. I'm all about it right now. I think that was the draft played to perfection. And Jerry Jones, people were crapping on him all day about how he's not going to know what he's doing. He stood pat and he was locked and loaded, pulled the trigger, and hit the bullseye.
From Air Force One, it looked like.
It was a sweet set. It's cooler than my setup. Number 2 is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. They did the exact same thing with Jalen Reagor, and that is a perfect fit. I would have been ecstatic with him way higher in the draft. And then number 3, I don't want to copy you on the Vikings. They did a tremendous job, I thought. So for just the sake of being different, the one guy we haven't talked about is Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And the Bengals are now set up in a position, this will tie into my prediction for tomorrow, are set up in a position to dominate this draft. They have the 33rd overall pick. They could trade back, but I think they have the option between Christian Fulton, Josh Jones, Grant Delpit, and Laviska Shenault, maybe Michael Pittman. They cannot lose. I would take Josh Jones. You get the number 1 overall player by a mile. You then get the number 14 overall player in Josh Jones. That is a dream scenario. They'll probably fuck it up, but that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think I've said this before. I think the AFC North is going to be the best division in football next year.
Over the NFC West, you mean?
I think the AFC North. Because Baltimore's clearly going to be good. Pittsburgh gets Big Ben back. Cleveland, I think, is a head coach away from being good, and they got a new head coach. And I think Cincinnati, if you look at where they're fortifying their team and as you said, their opportunity to dominate the draft, it's going to be a tougher division than many people believe.
I should mention, so I was looking at some of the people that, and by the way, there's a bunch of people that have stayed up, and that's awesome.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys
Thank you guys for hanging out. Someone mentioned the Broncos, and I should have lumped the Broncos in there. Stood pat, didn't trade up. Jerry Jeudy falls in their lap. It's called drafting the way you should. Predictions.
My first prediction is that the New England Patriots are going to get a first-round caliber wide receiver with pick 37. I just did, and if you guys want to go, our colleague Timo Risky did a terrific job. Great idea for having you be able to start the mock draft on the simulator at 33.
Oh man, I'm not going to sleep tonight.
I just did one simulation, and the New England Patriots got Laviska Shenault at 37, which just shows you the Patriots mind fucking the entire NFL.
You gonna tweet that out?
They are going to get a player at that position, and it just goes to show you exactly what you just said, which is doing the draft the way that folks intended it. Here's another prediction that I have, and I think it's sort of like micro, but I think Grant Delpit is selected ahead of Xavier McKinney.
I would guess so. I just drafted Grant Delpit for the Patriots at 37.
Exactly. Yeah, and my last one is I think that there will be multiple veteran players traded tomorrow.
Okay, so Chris Jones
and Yannick Ngakoue.
What do you think Ngakoue ends up getting?
And Trent Williams. They're all. So Trent Williams is another one who I think is a more than 50% to be traded.
What do you think? What do you think Ngakoue nets you?
Well, I'm trying to think of like I think Tennessee is a team that could trade for Ngakoue, even though they're in the same division. I don't think that they see the Jacksonville Jaguars as a threat. So that would be what, pick 61.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue with Jones and the issue with Ngakoue is the fact that they cost money, in addition to the draft capital. And I think unlike Frank Clark last year, and I think unlike DeForest Buckner this year. I don't know if there's a huge appetite for teams to not only give up capital but also pay a ton when clearly the worm has turned. I mean, we only saw 2 defensive tackles tonight. We only saw 2 edge players tonight.
Yeah, and no safeties.
So it weirdly, so interestingly, we talked about this on the forecast today. Obviously, the receivers came off the board later than we thought, but the number of receivers went over the total. The defensive backs was 6, right? Even though there were no safeties, so 6 corners.
Right.
Like there were some things that worked out the way that we thought that they should. You know, when we clearly said they might not, right? They certainly did with corners and wide receivers being taken especially from like pick 10 on at the rate that they were taken.
All right. So my first one is that the Bengals have a chance to just dominate the draft. They have put themselves in a fantastic position. I think they end up with Josh Jones, and we're just like, I can't believe this happened. The second one that I have is I could see another kind of run on both the tackle and receiver position in the second round, honestly, because I'm not sure people are ready to. They're going to get a little worried that those groups are going to get dried up, and so I look at that class of receivers like Pittman, Higgins. I put Chenault obviously in there, and Denzel Mims. I'd be very curious where they go. And I'm looking here. The Giants sit at 36. And if you had said, hey, the Giants could maybe walk away with a receiver like Laviska Shenault and an offensive tackle and Andrew Thomas, I would have not expected that, but that would be a huge win for the Giants. And then the last one I'll say is, look, the Cowboys, we just talked about them. They have a pick here at 51, and they have some opportunities to then pick a player of great value in the secondary. I think there are some left over. I look at a guy like Bryce Hall is still there. Really like Bryce Hall. Some safeties that are there. Obviously, you mentioned Delpit and McKinney, but Ashton Davis is still there, Antoine Whitfield Jr. So the Cowboys have a real chance to make some moves here. And so I think all those teams have proven that they're going to do smart things and are set up to capitalize on it in the second and third round, which is honestly, first round matters a ton. But the second and third round, you still get starters. It matters a lot. It's where doing your homework matters, which is why you should come hang out with us tomorrow, because we're going to be doing the same thing we did today. We'll be on starting at 6. Go check out some of you. There's a few of you listening. Go to pff.com, check out the mock draft simulator, do a couple before you go to bed. It is a lot of fun, and you can then dream sweetly about how your team has dominated the draft. It's a great. Timo has just crushed it with this thing. So shout out to me. Stayed up all night in Germany.
Yeah, he's a gem. So go ahead, use the great tool we've all built. But obviously throw Timo a shout out as he's done a ton of the work on the back end, and also just to make it look nice. It's awesome, and it's really helped prepare us for this. And the cool thing, to your point, we're only 1/7 of the way done.
This is
not even that.
Point.
I mean, compensatory picks. We're less than 1/7 of the way done.
How funny was it that we had like a Zoom glitch technology? We rehearsed like 15 times and managed to like totally poop ourselves. And the NFL, as Peter King predicted, that was smooth.
Well, they did it. And honestly, other than it was really strange, but apparently they talked about like a parent suicide we didn't talk about that on ESPN, which is good. On our end. But I think, that it did look good, from their perspective, although I would consider our content terrific, and Zoom glitches aside, really well done. Really good credit to you. So,
Thank you.
For people who really wanted the down, the nitty gritty of everything, I think we provided, first night, a really good value to the people.
And we keep it simple enough that, hey, we're not intimidating. Come hang out. It'll be fun. We got a lot of good feedback on the content, so that was good to hear. Draft 2020, it's a promo code you need, 30% off. But the mock draft simulator is free, baby. You do need a draft guide, though. Second and third rounds, you've got to have it. Fred texted me. Fred Godelli was like, "Hey man, I have a draft guide. It's the only way I could watch this damn thing. Is with the PFF draft guide." So he doesn't lie.
Fred had a great quote on one of the documentaries that said he and it came ahead tonight. He said Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones turned it in from a boring meeting to a live poker show. That's what we saw tonight.
That is what we saw tonight. The Cowboys, man, good job. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Get some sleep tonight, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Peace out.